Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, which is run in conjunction with the PRCA and the Work Crowd. I'm delighted that so many people have signed up to this webinar, which is about how to stand out in today's market. I'll just let people join. We've had over 200 people sign up, so I'm just watching everyone sort of join onto the webinar. So thank you so much indeed for joining this afternoon, which looks like it's going to be a great discussion. So just as an introduction, my name is Alice Weightman. I am the founder of Hanson Search, a headhunting business in the communications industry, and also the Work Crowd, which is an online platform that connects talented freelancers directly with projects. And also I'm the chair of the PRCA's independent group, and hence putting on this panel and webinar today. And what the group likes to do is really bring together freelancers from the communication industry to share and support and really learn from each other. And over the last year, we increased the size of the group tenfold. And this year we've had one of the biggest turnouts in subscribers coming to these events. So it's fantastic to bring everyone together. Clearly sharing ideas has never been so important. And at the Work Crowd, we're huge advocates of collaboration, sharing ideas, bringing freelancers together across the whole marketing mix. So, you know, we have over 6,000 freelancers that work across social media, PR, marketing, digital strategy. And we have, you know, over 2,500 clients. So we're great believers in you may be going solo, but there's no need to be alone. And that's why I'm so delighted to have panel today, Genevieve and Neil, to talk about how to stand out in today's market, which it's been a tough year for everyone. You know, we're still all now working from home again. We've had ups and downs along the year. So it's great to sort of share these experiences, and please do ask questions. There is a functionality at the bottom for Q&A, which I'll be feeding into our panel. But let's get going. We've got about 45 minutes to an hour. And I thought it'd be really nice to kick off with, I guess, backgrounds. You know, if you want to introduce yourselves and what led you getting into freelancing, because you've both got quite different stories and different sector experiences. So it'd be really nice to sort of deep dive into that. And then really how you found this year. Genevieve, would you want to kick off first of all?
Okay, so my background, I've been in PR and communications for about 25 years. I started off in fashion for about 5 years. And then when I had my son in 1995, late 1995, in 1996, I found myself starting my own business. And weirdly, I started it in beauty PR. So I was actually approached by a client that had a fragrance, and I thought, gosh, okay, I've done fashion. I was quite senior. I was PR director at the firm that I had worked for. I can probably transfer those skills across. So I actually started, I would say probably freelancing, but it developed into my own agency. And 12 years later, 5 staff, and $250,000 turnover in those days. You know, it was going really well. And then it got to a point where I was running it myself. I'd had 2 out of those 5 got pregnant very quickly, very unexpectedly. And so 2 kind of maternity issues to sort out, running the HR. And it got to the point where I wasn't really enjoying it. And I thought the whole reason for doing this was actually, apart from sort of to be successful, I just really wanted to enjoy my work. And I thought I'm doing more payroll, HR and everything else than I am actually doing PR. So I actually decided to go freelance then. But in fact, one of my clients said, no, don't go. We can't lose you. Please come in-house. So I ended up going in-house actually 3 days a week. So I still kind of wanted to be a mum and maintain that side of things. And I carried on doing that for about 3 years. And in fact, that was for the Sanctuary Spa Group, which is now part of PZ Cussons Beauty. So when it became PZ Cussons Beauty and a bigger beast, I stayed on for about a year of that. And then they merged all the PR departments and I decided to move on. And I took a role as MD of Kilpatrick PR, which was a sort of mid-sized beauty and health agency with about 20 staff. And interestingly, it was probably where I would have got to had I decided to carry on from where I was. It was going a similar time to when I started. So yeah, it was really interesting. And after 5 years there and sort of reaching early 50s, I just thought, you know what, I can't do this tube every day. I'm literally being pulled in so many directions. I love what I do. I love my clients, but I decided to make that break and go freelance again. And I was quite scared because obviously early 50s going freelance is very different to sort of early 30s. But it's been really interesting, and it's led me in lots of different directions this time, because obviously I've got a lot of years of experience and I've been able to kind of transfer those into lots of areas. So I've been consulting now for 4 years. This year has been challenging, to say the least. I'd like to say I've been lucky enough over the last 4 years never to really have to market myself. So I've always, I mean, I guess like a lot of freelancers with a lot of experience, you've got a lot of contacts, and you meet people and people come to you. But it sort of towards the end of last year, I decided to create my own website because I felt I needed a kind of online portfolio. And I built it myself. And that, again, was a really interesting project. I thoroughly enjoyed it, sort of learning a new skill. And so interestingly, I launched that end of January this year. And it was like, oh, right, okay. I've now got a website, but that's great. You know, what can I do with it? So it has been challenging. But what the website gave me was a voice. So, you know, as we got into March and into lockdown, I immediately wrote a blog on, you know, keep calm and carry on with your PR, because I realized a lot of people are just like halting their PR. Everyone was losing their jobs or being furloughed. And actually PR can still carry on, but it has to be different. And then I wrote another blog a month later on, you know, what to do for your PR right now. So for that one, I actually interviewed press and I interviewed other agencies to bring them on board. And again, it gave a really clear picture. So it was just kind of using that voice, and then you know, churning that out on LinkedIn obviously makes you more prominent, and it, you know, it kind of keeps you out there. So I mean, for me, it was very much about staying out there and staying relevant. I've used networks and support systems hugely. You know, webinars, Instagram lives have been hugely supportive. I've had regular coffee Zoom dates with contacts, with press clients, you know, trying to keep that going. And then using social media channels, I mean, probably spending far too much time on them. I mean, I have a couple of my own. I do one that sort of focuses on the 50 plus kind of health and beauty and well-being, and another one which is more worky, sort of orientated. And again, keeping that going has been, you know, really a conscious effort to stay relevant and stay out there and not just go quiet. Okay, you know, I may have had a few weeks where I was like, oh, I don't know where the next job's going to come from, but, you know, use that time to be creative. So I've done that, and I've also done a bit of writing, which I'd started doing a couple of years ago, again, when I was talking about transferring skills. So, you know, having a little bit more time this year has enabled me to kind of do a little bit more writing for kind of, I write for 50 plus websites. But again, that gives you a vehicle to kind of keep yourself out there and talk about yourself, basically, which actually, strangely enough, I think some PRs find a bit difficult.
Absolutely, brilliant. Well, thank you for sharing that. What a fantastic story to what led you into freelancing. And I must say, I'm amazed that you're doing 50 plus stuff, because I would never have put you in that age bracket at all. So I'm sure everyone else is thinking that, so I'm going to say it. But
late 50s
brilliant.
as well. Dare I say it?
Yeah. Neil, do you want to tell us a bit about what led you to where you are today, and how you found the market this year?
Yeah, sure. Where to start? I mean, I guess like Genevieve, I've kind of been in the industry around PR, marketing, social media for more years than I care to remember, probably 20 odd. And I guess what led to me being where I am now was I was previously managing director of an agency called Manifest. I'd been part of the, I joined when there were probably sort of 9-10 people. We'd grown to be 30 odd people in London. We had an office in New York, we had an office in Stockholm. I was managing director of the London business. And I guess I reached a point where an opportunity arose for me to strike out on my own. I thought, well, if I don't do this now, I may never do it. And I thought, what is it that I want? What do I want this to be? Do I want to be a freelancer? Do I want to be an independent consultant? Or do I want to be an agency or grow a consultancy? And I guess I never really thought beyond the first year. What do I want that to be? But I did I made an active decision that I didn't want to just position myself as a freelancer. Not because there's anything negative about that, but I think in my mindset, I felt like the type of work I do, quite strategic, on the creative side, planning, rather than being a media relations specialist, for example. My background's in social media, digital marketing, PR strategy, brand strategy. And I felt there was an opportunity to kind of offer something a bit more than just a single discipline. And so I went away and kind of thought, positioning myself as an agency. And for the first 8 months I only launched sort of like last summer, 2019. And for the first 8 months, worked my ass off, worked really hard, brought my own clients in, did a lot of networking, got out there, like Genevieve, kind of leveraged the network of contacts I had. And I just got to the point where I was starting to look for my first permanent employee. And then the pandemic hit. And all that work that from the previous 8 months just kind of went up in smoke. The 2 or 3 retained clients I had at that point disappeared. Not disappeared completely. I've kind of managed to keep a few projects going with them over the last sort of 8 months, but the retained work stopped. So I decided to put the plan to world domination as a small consultancy, put that on hold, and thought, right, I need to kind of reassess, redid my business plan, and thought, how do I get through this next? Well, at the time, I guess thinking back to March, we thought it might be a couple of months, 3 months, 2-3 months. But as it's kind of got progressively longer, it's kind of definitely been a case of the uncertainty makes it difficult to plan. So I think to begin with, I was very caught up on survival and making sure there was enough income coming in. And then I realized I probably had a bit of an epiphany. I thought, well, there's so much that I can't control, so just work on the things I can control. And that was carry on doing what I was doing. For 8 months I'd been out meeting people, networking, creating content, building my LinkedIn profile, doing all those things, and that didn't necessarily have to stop. So carried on doing that. It's definitely been a roller coaster of a 2020, and I'd say I'm now, there's opportunities the market seems to be picking up a bit. There's opportunities coming through, perhaps not to the same extent they were towards the end of last year, but it feels like there's kind of light at the end of the tunnel, even though we've just entered another lockdown. I think I feel more optimistic this time than I did last time, because there seems to be a kind of an end in sight, particularly now that they've just announced a potential vaccine. So we'll see.
Absolutely. I mean, the beauty of freelancing is you do have a bit more agility, a bit more flexibility. It's your personal living costs, and sometimes you can sort of scale that up or scale that down accordingly. How flexible though should freelancers be? I mean, you've both come from quite specific sort of different backgrounds. Should you start flexing a little bit and looking at other opportunities and applying for opportunities, or should you get sort of stay quite true to what you know and what you do? Neil, do you want to kick that off first of all?
Yeah, I think my thoughts on it and the way I've approached it is, I guess because I've gone more down the building a proposition as an agency, I've been quite clear about the types of brands I want to work with and type of work that I want to do. And so I kind of position myself as doing brand clarity and creative PR for startups and scale-ups that positively change the world. Now that is kind of a way of trying to be quite specialist and niche, but it's still very broad, in that there's lots of startups and scale-ups out there. But I'm telling the world who I want to work with, the types of brands that I want to work with, the type of expertise I've got. But I work with food and drink brands, I work with consumer technology, I work with lifestyle brands, I do a little bit of B2B technology. So I'm the way I kind of put myself out there and the messages that I create and the positioning is all about working with startups, and that means I can position myself as an expert for doing comms for startups. That doesn't mean I don't pick up projects that fall outside of that remit, because naturally you've got contacts, people will refer you, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to say, no, I'm not going to work with that, particularly when you're starting out. I think there's definitely a bit of a scramble for revenue. I remember, when I first started, there was definitely a temptation just to take whatever came along. And to begin with, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think if you're very, very niche, I know I've got some friends who work just in the hospitality industry or just with the travel industry. And obviously, at the start of the pandemic, that was a very difficult time. So I think if you're too niche, it can be a bit of a problem, but I don't think staying in a particular lane. I think the beauty of having a particular lane is it means you have a consistency and regularity to what you talk about, particularly if you're trying to build your personal brand or your agency brand, and it positions you as that kind of expert in that sector.
Great. Genevieve, how have you found things this year, and sort of have you stayed on path to what you're known as, or have you tried other areas?
Yeah, I think it's really important to be flexible, but I think within reason. And I also think it's important to be true to yourself. So, again, as you were saying, Neil, I think the tendency is, if someone approaches you with a project, it's like, yes, I'll take it, because we don't know when the next one's going to come. But at the same time, I think be realistic, because, look at everything and look at things, say, will I actually be able to do a good job on that? If you know that you can't, maybe bringing in another freelancer, look at your own network and look where you can maybe cross-fertilize, or maybe it's, actually interestingly for me, because, I touch on social media, but I would never say I'm an expert. And I've done kind of strategy, but I've always preempted it by saying I'm not an expert. I'll give you my view, and I have quite strong views, but I'm not an expert. So I would always look if a client approached me, I would take something on, but I would bring in an expert to support that offering. In terms of my own kind of year, I think I've used the time to be a little bit more creative. So I'm not sure I've done. And well, probably the only completely new thing I've done is actually I decided to do complimentary taster sessions or consultations. So I think I launched those in about, I think it was late April. So we were in the kind of the heart of lockdown, maybe beginning of April. And I decided that actually that would be I thought a lot of people are really confused right now. They don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of panic. So I offered 30-minute taster sessions. I created a web page to sort of show what they could get and what they could discuss. And I pumped that out on LinkedIn, and it was okay. I thought I'd get a lot more. I did get a few, and actually I got some business out of one of them, which was really exciting, because that for me, it's all very well getting business when you're referred, and when you've been in business a long time, you've got contacts, you're referred a lot, but there's something really magical about having a complete stranger, kind of having a consultation with a complete stranger who doesn't know who you are or doesn't know anyone that and having that consultation, and then coming back to you 2 or 3 weeks later and saying, well, actually, could you handle this project for me? And actually it was something a little bit different, because it was for a brand owner who didn't understand whether to set up an in-house PR department or to go external. And obviously with my experience, I could actually break that down for him and go, this is what an in-house would look, this is what a freelancer could look like, and this is what an agency could look like. That's a really hard thing to market to a client. Actually, I can do that. So it was actually quite refreshing that he saw that I was able to do that from our initial consultation. So that was quite exciting. But yeah, so I guess, in terms of flexibility within your means, definitely. And I think it's important, as Neil says, stay true to your brand and what you want to do. But at the same time, if it's something that's slightly off track, that looks interesting and you've got a passion for it and that you think you can do a great job, you never know where that could lead also. So I think definitely be really open-minded.
Absolutely. And actually, we're already starting to get some questions coming through, and it leads very nicely onto one question, which is about networking. And I think you've answered a little bit of that already, but how to network effectively and make positive contacts during COVID times, and then converting them into business when you can't network in person. So, although it's great doing these webinars, obviously we used to do them live and then you could network, which is much harder now to do that. So, any top tips of how to make positive contacts that can convert to business? Of course, that example you just given is a great one.
Shall I go? I'll go first.
Yeah.
So that one I think is probably a great one. I think it's really hard to make new contacts in this climate. And also, as you say, when you can't kind of go out and meet people face to face, I think LinkedIn is a brilliant portal. And I think, if you don't use it, I think a lot of us don't use it enough because most of us are too busy most of the time to kind of understand what it can do for you. So they actually do a lot of courses. I haven't actually done one yet. I signed up for one and then I was roped into something else. But, actually take that time to do your research and how you can use those platforms, because they're all here to help you. And I think, even on WorkCrowd, for example, there have been a few jobs on there that have come up where I've applied for them, I've written to the client, and I thought, potentially that could be creating new contacts. You may not get the job because you may not have the perfect skills, but if the brand looks interesting to you and you can add value, contact them, because you've got nothing to lose. And I think everyone is a little bit more open-minded. I'd like to hope that everybody's a little bit open-minded with this current climate as to kind of what's out there, and perhaps not going down the traditional routes that they would normally go down in terms of freelancers.
Neil, what's your thoughts on networking?
I guess my approach to networking is probably less to look at it as networking and just think of it as finding interesting people to either connect with or introduce yourself to. Or LinkedIn's a great platform for finding people who are your target audience, and it's great for not having to be particularly salesy. You don't have to contact someone and go, hey, I'm a PR person and I can help you. The beauty of LinkedIn is people are posting content, they're posting articles, they're posting thoughts about their business, about their day-to-day lives, about their personal lives. You don't necessarily have to go straight in there and talk about the services you can offer. You can follow them, you can ask to connect with them, you can like a comment they've made, you can post a comment and respond with your thoughts. It's an amazing place to just interact with people without being too pushy and too in your face. If you think about a conversation in a room, you just start talking about stuff, your personal life, your journey to that event. You've got an opportunity to kind of do that through LinkedIn, and there's ways you can do that. Part of it is optimizing your own presence and having your profile optimized and creating content and posts yourself. And I think that's why it's important to have that kind of lane that you stick to, because if you talk consistently about 2 or 3 things on a regular basis, you're going to get to be known for that thing. So I think use LinkedIn. I think I found that just by asking to have a chat with people, I think over the last 8 months, I've been surprised by how much people are willing to just have a virtual coffee and a chat, much more than they would be in person, because it's less of a commitment. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to even leave their office. You can have a chat for half an hour and then you can go about your business. And I think, coming back to what I was saying at the start about not thinking of it as networking, I'm very much of the view that try and help people. Always try and offer either some advice or some help, or ask a question, or introduce someone to someone you know, or send someone an article that you've seen that's interesting that might be relevant to them. Because whilst it may not do anything immediately, it might be in 12 months time they turn around and go, oh, I had that chat with Neil 12 months ago and he gave me some great advice and I'm now ready to act on it. And so I think too many people probably think about networking as, I've got to go out and win new business. I've got to have a call and I've got to come out with it having a piece of new business or a project result from it. I think everyone just needs to kind of slow down and take a step back. And as Genevieve said, the platforms like the WorkCrowd are great because there's people actively looking for people to work with, which is great. But then there's also informal networking platforms like Lunch Club, which I discovered about a month and a half ago. And it's AI based. It's like an algorithm. You put in all your interests and it basically matches you up with people who have similar interests. They might be looking to hire someone. They might be looking for advice. You can basically set out your criteria. And I've just had some really interesting chats with people. I've helped a couple of people with their branding and their positioning, just in a very informal way. And I've got some great advice from some business coaches and personal coaches who are just kind of saying, you need to, are you thinking about the world in this kind of way? And at some point in the future, I might work with them. Either I might ask them to work with me or vice versa. And then another thing I've done is I joined a great agency group called the Agency Collective, which is a group of independent agencies. There's similar ones for freelancers, and everyone just shares best practice and advice. And I joined it thinking I just want to be in a group of people who are going through the same issues. And I've met some amazing people, and I've also made some great strategic partnerships with other agencies. Some are web design agencies who don't do branding and brand strategy, so I'm helping them with that. And I'm not a web development agency. I don't have those skills myself. However, I can speak. The way I work is I look at the whole problem and come up with a solution for a client, and that might involve building a new website or creating an app or creating some content or a video, etc. And I've now got this amazing network of people who I can bring in to help me deliver a project, where before I might have just been able to offer one narrow aspect of it. I can now say to the client, here's how I can help you solve this entire issue. And I'm going to bring in these people that I know. And I'm very transparent about it. I'm not an expert in every area, but I think the background I've got lends itself well to being able to see a problem and offer an overall solution. And that means I can bring in other contractors, freelancers, etc.
Absolutely great. Thank you so much indeed for sharing that. There's some great tips there and advice on sites to use. I've had a couple of questions around startups. So Neil, you mentioned about working with startups, so I'll sort of point those to you. But from both sides, so what are the characteristics that a startup should be looking for when looking to engage with a freelancer? And also, someone said, but hold on, startups don't have any money. What's a reasonable fee? So maybe you could kind of cover those questions.
Oh, right. So do startups have no money? Some have lots of money. Some are very well funded. I think it depends on, again, it comes back to who you choose to work with and the process you go through to ascertain whether they have enough budget to be able to pay for your services. And it also depends on the type of work they're asking for. There's some startups who have been through, seed funding, but they're also bigger startups that have been through sort of Series A, etc. So I don't necessarily think that all startups don't have budget. I think there's definitely opportunities there, and I think it kind of depends on the type of businesses you want to work with. I've worked with bootstrapped startups, and yes, there's potentially a risk there that you might not get paid, but I think as long as you're upfront with them and say my payment terms are X or Y, and you perhaps get paid a percentage, or I sometimes ask for 50 or 75% upfront, that kind of mitigates that risk. But then I also work with scale-ups who are, have been around for a number of years and are still growing at 20-30% a year, and they're going through additional funding rounds. So I think I don't feel limited by saying I work with startups and scale-ups. I think and particularly in a global pandemic and a recession, that's when startups get launched. That's when more and more people start up their own businesses. So there's lots of opportunity that I feel is there. And I guess in terms of what characteristics should a startup look for, I guess it very much depends on what the startup or what that business is looking to achieve. I feel like I offer I kind of help with brand strategy. So I help a startup to articulate what they do, and why they exist, and build the messaging around that. And then I take that and turn it into how we amplify that brand, and through PR and social media. I think being multidisciplinary has certainly helped me, because I can look at the whole sort of communications issue and figure out a solution that fits. But sometimes a startup might just want to announce that they've won some funding, or they're launching, and they may just need a straight sort of media relations expert who's really tied into the news agenda and can really help position them in a great way.
Great, thank you for that.
Can I add to that? Because I've actually worked with a couple of startups, and in fact, one of the startups I was just mentioning to Neil last year, who actually launched at the beginning of this year. And I think one of the reasons, a bit like you were saying, Neil, is that I got the job was because of being able to look at the bigger picture for them and actually help them to strategize. So it's kind of that, I would say, with a startup, unless they're looking for kind of cheap labor, in which case you've got to be a bit careful. A lot of the time they're seeking that kind of senior advice in terms of PR, because they quite often don't have those skills. So I think, you know, if you go in quite authoritatively, I think it's important to have some sense of flexibility, but also to be quite firm in terms of not getting your fee battered down, because, you know, quite often they do have funding and they have a budget put aside for PR. Otherwise they wouldn't be talking to you. So more often than not, they need to know what they're going to be in for. So be transparent about your costs. You know, you can perhaps, what I did actually, I negotiated a 3-month project, and then ended up being kept on a monthly basis, you know, a couple of days a month for about 6 months. So, you know, you can do it that way, so they know exactly what they're in for. They will have to look at their budgets and kind of make sure that every penny is going to count. So I think it's just being really clear, but I wouldn't be afraid to work with startups, because I actually think that's the way forward. And I think, you know, that's a really, really great opportunity for freelancers at the moment, are the startups.
Absolutely, and we get a lot of startup projects on the Work Crowd, so it's definitely, and often they start with a small project and then they can lead to something bigger.
Exactly.
Well, this is it. I think it kind of depends. You need to have to think about what kind of work you want to do. Having been the MD of an agency, we used to bring in freelancers on a day rate, and they might come in for a week, 2 weeks, 5 months. You know, it depends on the project. There's lots of that kind of work around. There's lots of agencies, and particularly now where maybe headcount isn't being expanded at the same rate it was before the pandemic, freelance resource is great. So if you're thinking about going freelance, I think there's probably lots of that kind of work around. But I guess I took a decision early on that wasn't the kind of work that I wanted to do. I wanted my own clients. And once you have your own clients, it makes it difficult to go and then do 3 or 4 days here or there, or do a 2-week contract, because you've got your own clients to worry about. So that does make it has its pros and cons of that approach. You've got more freedom to work with who you want to work with. And I noticed someone was asking a question about day rates versus charging a premium. I wouldn't say it's about charging a premium. It's about pricing the project or pricing the client, and always price the client. Don't price if you sell a day rate, you're only ever going to be able to sell the number of days you have in a month, and there's a ceiling there. So I think going and working with agencies and doing 2 weeks here, a month there, etc., probably gives you more stability, and it's probably a little bit more regular. But there is probably a limit on what you can. Well, I guess it really comes down to what type of work you want to do, really.
Absolutely. And certainly, you know, we try and encourage more project-based pricing rather than day rates for that very reason.
I think clients like that, because they know what they're going to, you know, they know what they need to put aside. Absolutely.
Well, we're getting lots more questions coming through. So quite a few on work-life balance as a parent, and juggling being a mum or a dad and looking after children, especially at the moment during the previous lockdown where schools were shut as well. So question on how to balance work-life balance. And I think it's tough as a freelancer where you are winning business, you're doing the job, you are HR, accounts all wrapped up in one. And also, is going on mat leave a major disruptor, especially in other people's eyes and perception, or when coming back, especially when you're coming back into the market, or is it not so bad? I'm happy to help on that. But first of all, work-life balance, how do you get that right?
I mean, it's probably very difficult for me because my son's 24. I mean, he's still living at home, but he's working. So we're all working here. So it's more a case of trying to share the space as opposed to kind of being pulled in different directions. I think that one's never easy. And I have really felt for, you know, friends of mine and colleagues who've got younger children have had to do the homeschooling. Thankfully, the schools are still open. I think employers are a little bit more understanding, and I would hope that they are for that kind of thing, but that's probably not something I can add too much. Alex, I don't know if you...
Yeah.
Sorry, Neil.
Yeah. Neil, have you got family, or what's your situation?
Yeah, so I've got two young daughters. I've got twin daughters who started school in September. So when when lockdown happened in March, September seemed a very long way away because their childcare closed and we had them at home. And obviously I was trying to run a business or grow a business. My wife was working from home, so it created its own challenges, which I'm sure lots of people on this webinar now probably had similar situations. I think actually, because I was working for myself, it gave me greater flexibility, and I was probably less stressed as a result, because it meant I could manage my own time. I could take on the projects I wanted to take on. I knew the level of what's the word, capacity that I could, you know, mental capacity as well as just kind of resource to be able to have two young daughters at home who needed my attention, and being able to deliver the work that I was delivering. I think actually, in hindsight, thinking positively about the pandemic, if I'd managed to retain all the clients I had at the beginning of the pandemic, I probably would have gone insane quite quickly, because I was already working a lot, and then having kids at home and the distractions that they bring, I don't think I would have been able to manage. So I think losing some of the revenue there was probably actually a good thing in that situation. But work-life balance, one of the reasons to work for myself was to have that flexibility. And yes, the pandemic wasn't kind of built into that plan, but I did want to be in a position where I could take my kids to school and pick them up, or take a day off here and there. But the beauty of it is I can manage my time. I can work into the evening if I want to, take the day off. I can, and vice versa. I can get up early, do a couple of hours before they go to school, take them to school. So I think it is difficult when you're out on your own to kind of get that right, because you do have to do everything yourself. You know, you go from having, or I went from having a big team around me of people where I had to do, you know, I was running the agency, and I'd stepped away from doing a lot of the client work. But what this has meant is I can step back to doing what I love, which is the client work, but I'm also doing my own marketing, I'm doing my own profile building, I'm delivering the work, I'm doing my own invoicing. So there is a lot of challenges to overcome, but I think you need to have it. I think my piece of advice would be to think about what you want to get out of working for yourself, and stick to that. If you want more free time, you can absolutely ensure you have that free time. I think it just comes down to the type of work you take on and how you go about delivering it.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a great believer. I don't think you ever get a balance. I think it's always a bit like that, and you have to be able to be comfortable with that and not get stressed about it. You know what I mean? And actually accept that sometimes there's going to be more work on, or sometimes your kids need you more, and it's
exactly.
making
That's the beauty of freelance.
Yeah.
Can I answer the maternity question?
Yeah.
Because I think it's a really interesting one, and it's quite sad that it has to be asked in a way, isn't it? Absolutely, you should take your maternity leave, and it shouldn't make you any less relevant, and it really shouldn't affect your job. I mean, that's how it's supposed to be. I think, you know, if you're concerned, I mean, actually, probably interestingly, that's why I left my job when I was pregnant, because I realized it wasn't going to be accommodating to me in the way that I wanted it to be, in terms of sort of going back or having the amount of time off. So, but I think it's, you know, the way to do it is to look at the culture of the company, look at other people that have gone off on maternity leave. Have they come back to the same roles? Have they all mysteriously disappeared and left? That's a bit strange. Maybe contact them and ask them why. But I think, you know, you personally, for me, it's family first. And, you know, my career is really important. But, you know, if you're having a child, you're having a child for a reason. And, you know, you've got to decide what's best for your own mental state as well. You don't want to be worrying about your work when you've just had a baby, or, you know, whether the company is going to kind of sideline you. So I think, you know, again, that's kind of probably really important to look at the culture that you're working in.
Absolutely. Just also from a recruitment perspective, I think businesses are much more flexible now, and you know, they're really focused on hiring top female talent. So, you know, I've seen it definitely change in the 20 years that I've been recruiting. Someone's asked about Instagram and having a personal profile to promote themselves. Do you think it's worthwhile? Is this something that you would recommend? This individual's just been made redundant post, and so is looking to freelance now. And would that help in terms of raising the profile?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I guess it depends on where you think your target clients might be. If they're likely to be on Instagram, then yeah, absolutely build a presence on Instagram. If you think they're likely to be on LinkedIn, then build a presence on LinkedIn. If they're on both, then I think consistency across both. The way I've kind of approached it is, although I've got the agency presence, which is Outliers, trying to run 2 profiles and do marketing for myself, where most of my leads come from, because that's where my contacts are, is actually a lot of work. So I've concentrated on building my profile on LinkedIn, because, you know, there's hundreds of millions of people on LinkedIn who are there to connect and network with people. So I think that's where most of your audience are likely to be. And it's kind of building a presence and posting consistently. And as I said earlier, having 2 or 3 things that you talk about consistently for a long time, not just like a couple of times, not just a week, not just a month, but basically for the next year or so, pick a couple of things that you want to be seen as an expert in. So if you do PR for food and drink brands, talk about PR for food and drink brands, and to the point where people kind of say all you talk about is you know, that I think that's kind of the profile you need to build, so that you're seen as an expert in that. Yes, you want to add a bit of personality, and you want to add, you know, some of your own kind of personality in there, but I think having consistency and building your, I think particularly for freelancers and independents, building your personal brand is probably more important at this stage, but choosing where your target audience are going to be.
Right.
And yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I think, you know, an Instagram profile is great for keeping you relevant, but also be very careful what you put out there, because you want to be seen to be working, you want to be seen to be busy, and you want to be seen to be obviously passionate about the area that you're working in. So just, you know, just be very careful. And the beauty of Instagram is that you can kind of really think about creatively what you're going to put on those grids, but it also gives you the opportunity to comment. So for example, if you want to go down the road of working for other agencies, make sure you're following all the other agencies and you start to comment. You can see when they're winning new clients, so you can see that perhaps they might need some help. You can contact them. It can be really useful for that type of thing as well.
Good. I've had some questions around sort of social media freelancing and illustration. You know, people have been made redundant and they're looking to get into freelancing, and they haven't got a whole raft of experience. How do they sort of break through? So that early stage of breaking through, and this is specifically around sort of social media freelancing. Neil, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess sorry, I guess are they saying they're relatively inexperienced?
Yeah,
or
exactly. So if you're new to freelancing, you're sort of thinking, actually, that's an area that I want to get into, and you haven't got that much experience behind you. How would you break through?
I think again, it comes back to what kind of work do you want to do. I guess if it was me, I would probably be speaking to people like yourself, recruiters who have the links into the agencies, who will be able to source the opportunities for me. I think that's a good place to start, and that's a great way to get experience. And you meet lots of great people, and you meet lots of great clients by doing that. So I definitely recommend doing it via agencies. Whether you do that direct, or whether you speak to someone like Alison, who can kind of make those connections for you. And I don't think there's any one kind of magic silver bullet kind of. I think there's definitely like I said, have conversations with people, meet people. Things won't appear immediately, but you'll be surprised where an opportunity will come from.
Great. Another question: when trying to stand out in the crowd, people often do sort of free work. How do you prevent yourself from over-servicing a client and doing sort of free work? In an agency world, you'll often talk about over-servicing, but for a freelancer, that basically means you're doing it for free. How do you prevent this from happening? Either one of you.
Yeah, I think it's great to get your foot in the door, but I think you've got to set your boundaries really early. So whether that's a time boundary, like a number of days, or a delivery of KPIs, I think what I found that the most common kind of area of mistake between a freelancer and an agency or a client, or a PR and a client, is where the expectations are not matched up. So I think just set your guidelines right from the beginning. What are they expecting from you? What are you prepared to give to them for free? And after that, what is your cost should they want to carry on? Because ultimately that's why you're doing it, I would suspect. So make it really clear. And I think, it's not a bad thing to show them how brilliant you are, as long as there's a potential afterwards. And okay, it may not be straight afterwards. It could be 6 months down the line, or it could be that they could recommend you or refer you, or it could be a passion project. It could be, but I think just basically set your guidelines at the beginning.
Yeah, I think again, coming from the agency world, setting a clear scope of work, and agreeing that at the start is a good way to avoid working for free. And I would kind of almost there's a great book by a guy called Blair Enns called Pricing Creativity, and there's some very, very good advice in it, and there's some stuff that you can probably ignore. So a typical business book where there's lots of really helpful stuff and some stuff that you maybe ignore. But one of the things he talks about is don't offer solutions until you're getting paid. So the as creative people, one of the things we all tend to do is immediately start thinking about solutions. I've seen this before, and I know how to fix this. And you start talking to the client and saying, well, we could do this, this, and this, and immediately, and you think you're being helpful, and you are, because you're offering solutions. But then you're giving away the IP and the experience you've got. And so one of the things he talks about is basically get paid, is not sell yourself, but kind of position yourself on the expertise you have. Always be positioning yourself as the expert, and then then offer the solution once you've entered into that paid relationship. Now that doesn't necessarily stop you over servicing, but it makes clear at the very beginning what you're prepared to do as part of that project. And if you've got in that scope of work clear things that you're going to deliver, and then the client comes back and asks you for something else, then you have the kind of that to fall back on to say, well, that's outside the scope of work. I'm not saying it's easy, and particularly if you're new to freelancing and new to working with clients, particularly if you're relatively inexperienced, and maybe this is a fallback situation because of like redundancy or whatever, then that's not the easiest conversation to have. But I think there's tools you can put in place that will help you kind of push back on a client asking for too much.
Great, thank you. There's an interesting question that's come in on combating the demise of PR integrity and standing out when a client's already made up their mind. So, if a client already thinks, do you know what, PR is not going to work, or I've been sold something that's never going to happen, how do you then position yourself, especially as someone new coming into the industry? I don't know whether either of you ever faced this challenge before.
I have actually, because interestingly, one of my clients this year turned around to me and said, well, I've had PR and it's never worked for me, and I don't really know if I should be doing it. And I said, well, okay, let's take a few steps back. Why did you have PR? And they were like, well, to get some press coverage. But I said, well, what did you actually want to gain from that? And they actually didn't have an answer. So more often than not, I have found that clients don't really understand what they can get from PR. And okay, at the bottom line, you're looking perhaps at sales, but there may be all sorts of different reasons. And a PR can deliver a load of press coverage that could be awareness building, or could be profile building or brand building. So unless those goals are put in place right at the beginning, you're not gonna really know whether you've reached them, and you're not gonna know if you've had good PR. So my advice would be, if you have a client that says, oh, I really don't think I need it, say, well, what do you hope to achieve in your business? What are your business objectives? And then look at how PR can help you achieve that. So if it's more, I don't know, more retail outlets, it could be some trade or B2B, but, it may not be straightforward, but, just have an open mind and try and establish what their goals are and what their objectives are, and then you can strategize around it.
I always find asking where the client or the business wants to be in 3 years' time and what has happened in that time for them to have a smile on their face, that immediately shows you're thinking beyond just, I can get you a piece of coverage in this magazine that you've asked for, because you're thinking about the outcome for the business. What's the value of you helping them build their business and get to a certain point? And it might be revenue, it might be headcount, it might be awareness. But if you're thinking that far ahead in 3 years' time, you're also sowing the seeds of having a long-term relationship with you. And that is a really powerful way of positioning you as that expert, even if before that conversation, they maybe don't see you as that expert and they've got questions about whether PR is right for them or social media or whatever. They maybe don't need what you're offering. But I always think, and I always think people who've had a bad experience with a PR person or PR agency is a great opportunity, because you can show them what good looks like. And it might be the expertise and the experience you've got, the case studies you've got, or just talking about things in a way that you're talking more about the long-term outcome rather than just, yeah, I can get you 10 pieces of coverage. It's like, well, as Genevieve says, what does that actually mean? I could get you 10 pieces of coverage, but it won't help you attract that particular audience because they don't read that, or, whatever that is.
Right. We talked a lot about collaborating with other freelancers as a way of kind of helping to get business and working with, different freelancers who've got different skills. There've been quite a few questions actually around this in terms of then how that actually works. So what percentage should you be charging the client versus paying the freelancer that you're working with? And do you normally have a legal agreement with them, or is it all quite informal and relaxed? I don't know whether either of you have experience of doing this that you could share that would help with that collaboration piece.
I have done it. One of the times I did it, I was actually doing some travel PR for a client, and I basically I found my expertise was not travel, although a lot of my contacts obviously did straddle across, because now with the influencers covering pretty much whatever they wanted to cover, you could do it. But I realized I needed a travel specialist. So she just charged a day rate. We agreed a day rate to me, and we agreed, whatever it was, a couple of days a week. And that way, it probably worked out, I'm trying to think, maybe about 50% of the fee. But I think, again, it depends on the project and how what the future of that project is looking like. So is it worth giving away 50% of your fee, or even 75% of your fee? If that project's going to grow and potentially into other areas, it could be something that's worth doing. So I'd say it's case by case basis.
Yeah, totally agree. I work a lot with other people and other agencies, and it comes back to how, I guess part of it's how you're building the project fee. If you're just doing a day rate yourself, then it's difficult to bring in other people because you're giving away your day rate. If you're looking at the overall picture and presenting a I don't know, a value-based project fee, then you can build the costs of bringing in other people into that overall project. And it might be you only need, you've got a bigger strategy project and then activation, and you need to bring in a publicist, for example, to deliver, but that's only 5 days out of a month. Then you build those 5 days into your cost. And yes, you have NDAs and contracts in place. But I'm always very transparent with the client about who's delivering what, but I tend to project manage that, and they bring me in and they know that I'm going to manage that whole process, so they don't have to deal with me. So it kind of does depend on the situation, but I think there's the beauty of working in this way is you can work with such a wider variety of clients, and you can deliver such a wider variety of projects if you think beyond just what you can do yourself. And it very much depends on whether you feel confident and comfortable pitching or presenting something that is maybe a little bit outside the bounds of your personal expertise. But there's no reason why you can't bring in people who and the way I work is this is part of my networking strategy, is meeting people who I think at some point might be able to work with me and I could potentially put in front of a client. I'm always thinking, could I introduce them to a client, and how would they come across, and do they share the values that I have and the way that I want to work?
Great. I know we're coming short of time, so I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 last questions that I think are really relevant and important to answer. COVID times really challenging for people, and it's how do you manage workload with actually going out and standing out in the crowd and making sure you have enough projects coming through so that you're in a safe space. So how do you manage that side of, say, your new business development versus filling projects? And then the last question, what's your one thing that you'd recommend to stand out from your competitors that you feel your clients have really truly appreciated and working with you on that? So what's the one thing? Why should your clients want to work with a freelancer? What would make you stand out? But then how do you juggle your time? So we can squeeze those answers in really quickly. That'd be great. Neil, you want to go first?
Right. What was the first one? Sorry, I've already forgotten.
Managing your time, business over filling jobs. Right.
Okay. So I think one of the dangers that whether you're a freelancer, whether you're an agency, or it doesn't matter. I think one of the traps everyone falls into is when times are good, you think, oh great, I've got all this work on, and you forget to do the new business bit. You forget to do your prospecting and networking and stuff. So make time every single day to meet new people, post something on LinkedIn, update your profile, reach out to people potentially via LinkedIn, because that's where a lot of people are. Drop a few emails to people, do that consistently, and then when you all of a sudden the work drops off a cliff because for reasons beyond your control, like a global pandemic, you've still got those conversations going on, because it's really hard to win new business when you're kind of looking at the kind of that spreadsheet and there's no income coming in. You're like, oh shit. So I think definitely keep the consistency going, no matter how busy you are. Keep it going.
Brilliant. And your top tip of why clients truly love working with you as a freelancer?
I think probably, I would like to think, because I'm always very candid with people, and that if I don't think I'm the right person or the right solution for them, I will tell them, and I'll try and introduce them to someone else. And I think has given me trust, built a lot of trust with clients. And I'm not saying that necessarily makes me stand out, because there's a lot of honest people in our industry who are very trustworthy and do great work. But I think the other thing is to have a very clear value proposition, and be very specific about it, and be very clear about who you want to work with. You know, you could work with everyone. There's lots of businesses out there who need help, but I think being quite single-minded about the types of businesses you want to work with means you can stand out that much more, because you will be seen as an expert rather than just a generalist. And I think people do look for expertise, and that's what they'll pay for.
Brilliant. So just a quick answer for how do you juggle your time, and top tip to end us on.
Okay, so I think I've always done this because I work part-time anyway. So I've always spent, I would say, half my time actually networking and meeting people. And I quite often say, well, I've done no work this week, but actually I've done a lot of work, because if I've gone out and met 5 to 10 contacts, and they can be press, they can be old clients that have become friends, that is really worthwhile, because they may then meet someone who might need some help and they will refer you. So I think that's really, really important, just to keep doing it. And I think most importantly is to try and stay positive. So, you know, if you're don't be too hard on yourself. If you've got a load of work on, and you need to spend, and I agree with Neil, you need to spend an hour a day, maybe do it in the evening or have a day off. Just don't do it the next day, but do it when you're in a positive frame of mind, because there's nothing worse than going on those social media channels or network groups when you're actually feeling like, oh God, I'm completely swamped. So make sure you're in the right frame of mind. I think it's really, really important. And use those, one of the things I didn't mention, actually, there's some really good freelancer groups on Facebook that I found really useful, and just the kind of conversations. And I mean, I love helping people as well. So just being able to go and offer advice and get advice from that is really great. And in terms of why people want to work with me, still discovering that. No, I think probably one of the things is, you know, I have been around in the business a very long time, so I am seen as an expert in kind of health and beauty, PR and comms. So yes, I've got my field, but also I guess my reputation. So I think be really mindful of every piece of work you do, because if anyone speaks to any of my old clients or press, you know, I'd like to think they'd get really excellent feedback. So I think my reputation, the trust, I'm very honest for PR as well. It's quite transparent, and depth of knowledge just from the years of experience.
Brilliant. Thank you so much indeed, both of you. And if only I could read out all the comments we're getting about the fantastic advice that you've both given. I absolutely loved it. Clearly the audience have as well. So thank you so much indeed for sharing that. If anyone's got any questions, do send them in to me. If people are looking for projects and are new to freelancing, do sign up to the work crowd. We're getting more and more projects coming through. And let's keep sharing and helping each other, because it's great being able to come together. So big thank you from everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.